First video on 3D in Adobe Illustrator, and that included both the 3D filter tools and the 3D perspective grid. Adobe has made some updates to their 3D interface that in most ways have made the program more useful. But what I want to start to do is, if I was going to make a sphere the old way, and I should say that the old tools are sort of kind of still in Adobe Illustrator. So I'm going to make a sphere out of this simple circle, which just has a light gray fill in it. And that's changeable after you apply 3D filters. But I'm going to start by taking this, and I'm going to click on the eraser tool. And hiding behind the eraser tool is the scissors tool. And I am just going to cut this sphere into two semicircles like this one here. And the scissors tool just lets you break a path into pieces. And sometimes that's the most useful way to do it. So in the old days, if I wanted to apply 3D to this, I'd go to Effects, 3D, and we could look at 3D. All the tools that were there are still sort of there, at least in name. So let's choose Revolve. And it is revolving it from the left edge, which is Illustrator's guess, which in this case is correct. I want just sort of a basic sphere. I could do it from the right edge and get something a little bit more like a cylinder too, but let's select the left edge. And that works pretty good. The one thing I can't do that I used to be able to do is map art to this, at least on my M1 Apple. When Adobe, when they're discontinuing a feature, sometimes things start to break or get a little bit funky, and this is obviously a feature that's going to be replaced eventually completely by the new 3D tools. But something you could do with the old 3D tools that you can't do with this one is map art to it, and it looks like I still can. It looks like you could take any symbol that you've made yourself or that is still existing in here. In this case, I did not make a symbol, but if I had, it would be from my selection, and I could map it to this. And let's just stretch it all the way across. And my goodness, it seems to be working. Let's see, I have tried this without the video running, and I could not get that symbol to map to this. So that is, it seemed to be broken, but now it seems to be fixed because, if it doesn't work for you, then don't be surprised. It did not work for me several times until it did. The other feature that is in the old 3D tools, and it doesn't really apply to a sphere, is perspective. We're getting to do something, not really much. But if you had something like an extrusion, your perspective could make it look like your extrusion was diminishing into the distance, and that doesn't really exist yet with the new 3D tools. So let's say OK, and there is my classic 3D sphere. And if we look at the classic tools and we apply 3D Classic, there's just really three options: extrude and bevel, revolve, and rotate. And rotate is just basically the same thing as extrude without any depth. The new 3D tools give us a bunch more options. So we could take this and we can do what we did before. We can go to Effect, 3D, and I can select revolve, and let's get it on the edge so we get a sphere, and it looks a little bit smoother. Now there's no way to map a symbol to it, but there are a couple of other interesting tools. For example, we can give it a bunch of pre-existing materials. So that's just larch wood or comet surface. And you also have some lighting options. And we can also do things like, we can make it not revolve all the way around. And We can give it an offset so we get something a little bit more donut-like. And we can manipulate it sort of directly now. It used to be you had that little sort of proxy for the shape inside the window. Now you can rotate it. It takes a little while to get used to. It's just a matter of grabbing which one of these little bars for which direction you want to rotate it. So this is something that looks pretty good, and we can also mess with the lighting. This comes with a standard default lighting, but we can give it a more diffuse lighting. Top or right light. And we can mess with the intensity of that light. We can also take away the ambient light so we get a little bit more of a dramatic effect. So that's something you had with the previous, but it just gives you, takes away a couple of things you could do. There's no way to map a symbol to this anymore that I know about, but you can apply a material, and presumably these materials all come in their own special format, and you would probably need a 3D software to start creating your own textures. But that is something that you can do. You have a little bit more control now over the lighting and the texture. The other thing you have is a couple of other tools. So let's go back to objects. So for example, you can now inflate this, and that gives you something very much, or what at least what looks like very much a sphere without having to go through the trouble of cutting your sphere in half. So we can rotate this around. And we can see it's actually not a sphere completely because we've only inflated one side of that circle. We can click this box and inflate both sides, and then we get something a little bit more than a sphere. Or you can also, we can give it some depth and have something a little bit more like a capsule or a pill. And as with the other thing, we could give it any of these pre-existing textures that we might want. And we can adjust the lighting of that one as well. And I find that I use these mostly as a starting point for something else, but it is possible to make a whole scene. I think that if you're interested in 3D, Illustrator is both a good and probably a bad program for start. It's good in that it's really intuitive. You can work with the vectors that you're used to start your shapes. But it is limited in that you can't do like a fully rendered human face, at least as far as I know, as you could if you were dealing with Maya or one of the other full 3D suites of programs.